We are back with another, what I think is going to be a pretty cool episode. So Manasa and I have been talking a lot about backdoor Roths, and what has happened is Manasa has been collecting a bunch of questions that her clients are asking her and things we are seeing online. So in today's episode, we're just going to attempt to answer some of Manasa's questions on a backdoor Roth, what it is. Well, we'll see what questions she asked, and we go from there. Manasa, how does that sound?
Absolutely amazing, because I love to ask you questions.
Okay.
All right. So, like you already said, this is a popular strategy for high earners, and there's a lot written out there in the internet universe on backdoor Roths. So now people come back to us wanting to know whether this is a good strategy for them in order to be able to do this. So who would you think would qualify for a backdoor Roth IRA, and why do you think this is a popular strategy, Jane?
Okay, no, that's a fantastic question. So with a typical Roth IRA, you're able to make a direct contribution if your modified adjusted gross income is 150K in 2025 or 236 if married filing jointly. Once you go over that number, the IRS code does not allow you to make a Roth contribution. So this strategy, the backdoor Roth, has sort of come in, and even though backdoor sounds kind of weird, it is legal, that allows you to still be able to make a Roth contribution despite your high income. And of course, the whole reason why you want a Roth, or why people want a Roth IRA, is because we know the money grows tax free. And once you get to retirement age, this is one account where RMDs are not required. RMDs are required minimum distribution, because when you do traditional retirement accounts, so we're thinking, let's say IRAs, 401ks, at some point, because the account grows tax deferred, IRS comes in and says, hey, we want to get our share of this. They want to get their taxes, which forces you to start taking out some of that money, hence the required minimum distribution. Does that answer your question, Manasa?
A bit, yes.
Okay.
But if you can maybe share a quick example of who you would think would be an ideal candidate for a backdoor Roth.
Okay, absolutely. So let's talk about, we'll use John. John has a great income. His family is making, let's say, about 500,000 per year, right? They are not allowed by tax code to be able to do a Roth contribution. John and his wife, we're assuming this is a married couple, they've been contributing to their 401ks, and they've actually maxed them out. They've already contributed to their kids' 529. They have some good amount of money in taxable account. They have no debt, and they really want to save more for retirement. Now, at their income level, when I've looked at, let's say, their 401ks and their IRAs, they have a pretty high balance, which tells me at retirement time, the required minimum distributions are going to be pretty high, which means they are likely going to be in a pretty high tax bracket. So in this case, to help them start growing some money or start accumulating some money in tax-free growth, I would help them do the backdoor Roth, just like I described. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yes. So
Okay,
now
cool.
that we have an ideal candidate who
Mhm.
you would select for a backdoor Roth. So now I have maybe a different candidate who comes and says, Hey, I've heard of backdoor Roths, but
Mhm.
what is this mega backdoor Roth? And how do
Mm.
I find out if I qualify for that? So, would
Okay.
you be able to help us out with that, Jane?
Yes. So I love the name Mega Backdoor Roth.
Yeah.
So what has happened once, of course, all these things have to be allowed by IRS. Some companies will allow their employees to contribute extra to their retirement accounts. Again, it has to be allowed by the company. So let's say company, like maybe I won't use specific company names. Let's say XYZ company has created this option in the retirement account. So the way it works is you max out your, let's say, your 401k contribution, which is around 23,500 this year. And then you can do what's called an after tax contribution into the same account. Obviously, they're going to separate the buckets. Now, where this works and where the magic happens is where, as you contribute your after tax contributions, they go immediately and convert this to a Roth, right? Which is fantastic when you think about it. Now, if your company is not doing the conversion immediately, we might want to talk about that a little bit, but really for it to make sense, you make the contribution and immediately this gets converted to a Roth, hence the mega backdoor Roth. And the reason for the word mega, because I was looking at the numbers and I think this year you could potentially go up to 70K of retirement contributions using this strategy. Does that explain how the Mega Backdoor Roth works and why it's such a great tool if you have access to it and if it makes sense for your situation?
Definitely, Jane. And while we're talking about mega backdoor Roth conversions, I think it's also important to include here that this will be a taxable event. So, in case if that is your plan, it is important to keep money aside to pay for taxes, right?
Right. But actually, when you do the Mega Backdoor Roth, remember you're using after tax money, right?
Oh, I
So
see.
so as long as, so this is, you've already done the pre-tax, which is the 401k, and then you take your after tax money and you put it into this, as long as the company allows you to do the conversion immediately, you don't have to worry about taxes ever. And this is why it's such a popular thing. And like I said, it's not all companies that are willing to offer it, but if your company offers it, it's definitely worth having a conversation. Part of it is there's no income limit as to who can contribute to this or not.
Okay, that makes sense. But let's stay here for a little bit,
Okay.
because I am based in the Metro Detroit area. I have a lot of people who ask me these questions working for the big
Sure.
car companies here, right?
Hmm.
So now let's say you did not have after tax dollars in a 401k or that sort of an employer plan. Let's say
Hmm.
you were actually looking at the balances in your traditional 401k, so to speak, and your employers allowed you to take that and put it into the Roth 401k. Would that be
Okay.
considered a mega backdoor Roth conversion? And would that be a taxable event?
So with the 401k, this, you have two options, right? You have what's called the Roth 401k and you have the pre-tax 401k. So let's go back to John. Let's assume his company offers the 401k, and as part of that, they say you can do it pre-tax or you can do it after tax. So John has the option of saying, out of my 400 whatever k income, I want to reduce my taxable income for this year, in which case he'll just go the traditional 401k route. So that's one. On the other hand, he may say, I'm not too concerned about reducing my taxable income this year. So I'm going to take up the option of the 401k Roth contribution, right? In which case he's going to be taxed first and then he can put in his contribution into the Roth 401k. Now, these two have nothing to do with the Mega Backdoor Roth. This is another option on top of all these other retirement options. Does that make sense?
So what you're saying is, one, the employer should have these options, first of all,
Yes. Yes.
for them to be able to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, when they are making these different contributions, they have to take into account what their cash flow is going to be for the
Oh,
year.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
definitely, when maybe, it's not that big a deal for those who are in the high income bracket to think about cash flow. But if you are not, then that would be an important thing. Now, one
And
more question.
actually, let
Yeah.
me add one more thing because of you talking about the cash flow. So think about the money that's going into the after tax account, which becomes the Mega Backdoor Roth. This is money you would probably, if you didn't have that option, like for the people who come to me and they don't have that option and they want to save more, we end up putting it into a taxable account, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the thing to keep in mind as far as your cash flow, it can't be money that you need, because there's another little IRS thing that says with the Mega Backdoor Roth money, you cannot take it for at least 5 years. So you
Yes.
kind of have to keep that in mind. So anybody that's looking to do the Mega Backdoor Roth, which again, we're assuming the company is offering, they need to know that they can't really touch this money for at least 5 years. And the assumption we are making is this is money you're probably saving for retirement. Does that answer the question though?
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
it
Okay,
does.
cool.
So one last question on this
Mm-hmm.
one, though. So when you have multiple 401ks, such as the pre-tax and the post-tax,
Mm-hmm.
or the traditional and the Roth 401ks, when you have these, what are the limits on how much money you can totally put into these 401ks contributions in a year?
Mm-hmm.
And can you also do a Roth IRA contribution outside of this?
That's a good question. So how much you can put into both the pre-tax and the Roth 401k? I think they say it's about 23,500. So the pre-tax, whether it's pre-tax or whether it's already been taxed, which is the Roth, it's up to 23,500. That's one. With the Mega Backdoor Roth, I was doing the math the other day. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I know in total you can go up to 70K. So you can do the math, which is something like I said, up to 70K. Take 70K minus the 23,500 that you already contributed, and then minus what your employer is going to match you. I'm going to assume your employer is kind of generous. So let's assume if those two numbers add up to something like 30K, then you can put in 70 minus 30, close to 40K into this account. Now, here's the beauty of this whole thing. These are still considered employment retirement accounts. If you qualify, actually, in this case, we know you don't, you can still do a Roth, in this case, a backdoor Roth, outside of the 401, outside of the company's retirement plan. So does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
Okay, cool.
So, yes. So, coming down to this and
Mhm.
knowing like we're talking here about a lot of money, cash
Sure.
flow, and all that. when there are sometimes people will come to you, they've already sort of DIY'd this backdoor Roth themselves. But not to go too much into detail, because I always tell people not to, and to work with a financial planner when they have, or they want to make a backdoor Roth conversion or an IRA contribution. But very high level, Jane, would you be able to highlight, like, what are the three important things to remember if you wanted to execute a backdoor Roth IRA?
Okay, this is great. So I like to describe this as a two-step process, assuming no complications, and we'll talk about the big complication that comes in. So essentially, we know you don't meet the income limits, which is fine. So at a very high level, you'd go ahead and open a traditional IRA, right? And then you make a non-deductible after-tax dollars contribution to the traditional IRA that you just opened. And then ideally you wait a while, so there's separation of transactions. Don't invest the money yet. And then at some point come back and do a Roth conversion. So the money goes from the IRA, the traditional IRA, into the Roth IRA. And then at that point, you can actually start doing the investment. Now, when it comes to these contributions and conversions, the thing I always say to people is, do not mix these monies with other, let's say, IRAs or other accounts you may have had. The cleanest way of doing this is open a brand new empty traditional IRA and a brand new empty Roth IRA. Although I think with the Roth, you can use an existing Roth since the money is coming in, but definitely open a clean traditional IRA and kind of just use that as, this is my tool for doing the conversion. So that part is really, really key and really important. The part that I now see people missing and messing up a ton, which is sad, Ashley, to say, there's this thing called the pro rata rule. So what happens is IRS looks at all your IRA accounts outside of the retirement account. And so when you do the conversion, IRS looks at all this and says, oh, wait a minute, you already have another traditional IRA that we see over there, and you have another traditional IRA that we see over here. So what we're going to do, and I'll give you a specific example to show you how the math works. We're going to tax you on all these IRAs. So the whole event ends up being not tax free. So let me walk you through an example and you see what I mean. So let's go back to John. So John, we know he's got great income.
I'll let you give the example, but I have a quick question once you have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want me to talk about the example, or do you want to ask the question first?
No. I'll wait for you to finish with the example, Jane. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's okay. So, John has a traditional IRA. Let's say he had retired, he had switched jobs at some point, and he did the rollover because he wanted to take the IRA with him, the money with him, right? Remember, this whole pro rata aggregation rule does not apply to 401k. So here's John. He's got this old IRA somewhere. Now, let's say he's already over 50, so we know he's able to contribute 8K, not 7, to do the backdoor Roth, right?
So with the catch up. Yeah.
Yes, with the catch up. There's the catch up if you're over 50. Now, remember, this 8K has already been taxed, right? So this would be a non-deductible IRA. Now, let's assume he has this old IRA. And to make the math easy, let's assume his pre-tax IRA is 92K. So he then brings the 8K. So in total, he now has 100K IRAs outside, right? Now, if he goes ahead and does the conversion of the 8K, this is how the tax bill is going to look like, okay? One, think of the non-deductible portion, which is the 8K, divide by the total IRA amount, which is now 100K, right? And that portion is what's going to be the non-taxable piece. The second part of the equation looks like this. Think amount to be converted. So the 8K times the non-taxable percentage that we just calculated above. And that's the amount of after-tax funds to be converted to the Roth. So using this example, remember it's 8K, right? So 8%, and hope I'm keeping the numbers right, of the 100,000 K is non-taxable. So the converted amount is going to come from 92% of the pre-tax funds and only 8K from.
So, Jane, that was a great example. But here's my question. Is there anything else that they need to be concerned about the 7360?
Oh, yeah, because it now means, think about it, the 7360 of the original after-tax contributions is still mixed with the original pre-tax amount, which makes future accounting and contributions even more complicated in the future, especially if we plan to keep doing this. And so one way to try and avoid this is actually making sure that you don't have any pre-tax IRAs before you attempt the conversion. And so in John's case, the 92K he has in the IRA, I would have him roll it out to hopefully do a rollover to his 401K, and just make sure by December 31st, he has no IRAs anywhere apart from all the 401Ks. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So
Okay.
a lot of things to consider here, right? One is that you don't have a pre-tax IRAs at all before you make or before you even think of making a backdoor Roth IRA. And secondly, is to know what these IRAs are that go into this pro rata bucket. So when we're talking about that, Jane, would you be able to go into a little bit about, okay, what goes into this bucket? When we're saying IRAs, are these just the traditional IRAs that he has made, or will this also include the rollovers maybe that this person has from maybe a previous 401k that he has now rolled it over into this? Yeah.
Good question. So this aggregation rule applies to all IRAs that you have. So let's assume, to your point, like the example we used at the beginning, he had worked at another job, he had a 401k, and he did the rollover into an IRA. That will apply. If he has a SEP IRA, we've talked about SEPs in a previous episode. If he has a simple IRA, so basically any IRAs apply to this bucket. And again, the easiest way I explain this to clients is make sure if we're going to do this, let's say like for this year, by December 31st, all your outside IRAs need to be completely empty. Otherwise, we're going to fall into that whole aggregation pro rata rule, which is a real pain. And I know a lot of CPAs don't even want to have to deal with it.
I know. And this is where, the connection between your financial advisor and your tax advisor keeps coming back, and we bring it up over and over again. But another thing also, Jane, is maybe we should talk a little bit about this, is the timing aspect of making these decisions about backdoor Roth, right? Whether it is a mega backdoor conversion contribution or a backdoor Roth contribution, is when does this make sense to you? You know, by
You mean
that,
like the timing of the year, or?
the one is that, yes, the timing of the
Okay,
year
okay.
itself, but
Mm-hmm.
then also whether how much money you have in this bucket, which will push you into the pro rata rule, but
Mm-hmm.
also the fact that now you have money that you're adding into your taxable income, possibly when making these conversions, especially with the mega backdoor, is what I'm
So,
talking about.
right.
Yeah.
So the good thing is, like I said, with the Mega Backdoor Roth, because this is after tax contribution, you don't have to worry about taxes as long as you're able to do the conversion. So basically, you now have a giant pile of Roth money growing, right?
Yeah.
If we take care of the pro rata rule, the aggregation rule, which is why I say the timing, the date that's critical is December 31st. You don't have to worry about taxes impacting whatever you're doing. But in terms of when you can contribute, remember, to be able to do the Mega Backdoor Roth, you need to max out your retirement plan. So let's say the 23,500. So and the money, by the way, comes out of your paycheck, so it's not something you can go back and do retroactively. So what I'll say is, if we're planning on maxing out your retirement account and doing the Mega Backdoor Roth, then we can't be putting in $100 at the beginning of the year. Ideally, you spread it out throughout the year. So you need to do a bigger chunk, and we can do the math. That's pretty easy to do to ensure that you hit the numbers by the end of the year. Now, as far as the backdoor Roth outside of work, we just need to finish the contribution by the tax deadline. So in 2025, you can contribute money to your non-deductible, your traditional IRA up until next year, April 15th, right? The
Mm-hmm.
conversion can happen later, but the contribution needs to happen before April 15th. But again, the key thing is you cannot have any IRAs outside of work by December 31st. Otherwise, we are going to run into these aggregation rules. And so, in cases where we're not able to take that IRA money out, my suggestion at that point is probably hold off until the following year, because you really don't want to get into that whole mess calculation kind of thing. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
I,
okay,
I, I
okay.
guess also then, Jane, maybe we should clarify
Mm-hmm,
that in order to not have the pro rata rule apply to
mm-hmm,
you, if you decide to first convert your pre-tax IRAs to Roth IRAs, then that is something that you have to work with the financial planner. And if somebody came to you with that and asked you for options, what would you tell them as far as planning that? And I know
yeah,
it
so
would be very unique to each individual, right?
yeah, but the thing I say, because I know clients sometimes tend to procrastinate, things happen. What I say is, let's not attempt this backdoor Roth conversion until I know for sure that all your IRAs are empty. And the reason I'm saying that, because remember, we have until April 15th
Mm-hmm.
to do the contribution and we can do the conversion anytime after. So let's
Mm-hmm.
not risk it because sometimes we never know how long the rollover is going to take. So let's not risk getting into that mess. And so my advice to them is, obviously, let me know what all the IRAs that you have. Let's figure out how to empty them. Then and only then can we talk about doing the backdoor Roth conversion. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, that was pretty intensive. We really pull that apart. I think that's good. because these are common pitfalls, and we do need to talk about how to avoid them as far as backdoor Roth. So now, let's say, and this happens to me from time to time, when somebody will come to me and say, hey, I want to make a backdoor Roth because they don't, they're not eligible for any other way of getting money in there, but they have forgotten, or they have not kept track of previous IRA contributions or previous Roth IRA contributions that they may have made. And at that time, I do tell them that, this is something that they would have to go and track back and get all the basis of all these contributions that they have made. And that's when it's really important to make sure that they have filed that form 8606 when making these contributions, so that at least you have one way of getting back into it. You could go back 10 years to the IRS's portal and grab your transcripts for the past 10 years, but that's all you can go to and not the ones before that. So another thing, just wanted to put that out there. Yeah. And, moving on though, so in a cross-border context, and we keep coming back to this because this is our audience. Now, in a cross-border context, what is the backdoor Roth? Would that be applicable to people who may want to move out of the may want to move out of the US sometime, or are not able to stay on?
Yeah, so I've seen a couple cases where somebody will come in and say, oh, I have the option of the Mega Backdoor Roth. And I'm like, great, let's investigate that. But for us to really, truly investigate whether this makes sense for you or not, I need to understand your immigration status now. I need to understand, or at least have an idea of where you're going to be when you retire. Basically, I want to understand where you're going to be when you start taking money out of the Roth or the Mega Backdoor Roth, money out. And so what happens is, we talk a lot about tax treaties. A lot of tax treaties do not recognize the tax advantaged option or the tax advantage status of the Roth account. And partly because, I think we said this in another episode, the Roth account only came into existence around 98, I think, which is way after Manasa and I had actually come to the US. So it's not included in a lot of these tax treaties. So the thing, first of all, I want people to understand is the Roth account, or versions of Roth account, is a US IRS tax code option, has nothing to do with the other country. So that's the first thing I want them to understand. With other retirement accounts, let's say like a 401k or a traditional IRA, those can sort of come into how other countries define pensions. And as soon as you say pensions in other countries, they sort of kind of get it. This is money you're going to get after a while, and we know the money is going to be taxed, that kind of thing. So if you're planning, for one, on retiring in a country where your country, and there's only like maybe 6 or 7 countries, doesn't recognize the tax status of the Roth, what's going to happen is, the minute you leave the US, right, and you start filing taxes in the other country, one, the other country is going to start taxing you on this Roth account, because to them, it's just a foreign taxable account. That's one. And also, by the time you come to take money out, they are going to tax you, which means you kind of lose all the tax benefits that you had accrued, okay, when you put money into it. So that's the one thing I always say, let's consider the country that you're going to be retiring to. We're then going to dig into the tax treaty, and Manasa and I love to do that, to see if the account is mentioned in any way, shape, or form. If that's the case, then I'll be like, okay, don't worry about it. I know we have the option, but the taxable account is still a good option for you. You don't always have to have the Roth account. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely, it does. And well, the backdoor Roth IRA is could be a great option for investments, but it will not be a great option for everybody in the cross-border context, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And also, like you just mentioned about treaties, it's important to see if any one of these have been updated to include the Roth. I think that maybe there are governments now that are kind of doing that, but not that we have seen many so far.
One of the few, I was going to say, one of the few that kind of calls it out is the UK tax treaty does call out the
Yeah,
Roth account.
yeah.
The Canadian tax treaty also allows the Roth account, but I actually worked with a client the other day that was moving to Canada. You have to make a special election for it to be allowed to continue being a Roth account. So yeah, I think the key thing is let's talk, let's figure out where you're going to be, and then we can figure out if it makes sense or not, which is where we kind of keep going back to it may be good, but it may not be good for everybody. And
Hmm.
so financial advice, as we keep saying, is really needs to be customized. It has to make sense for your situation. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, for sure. And there are very specific windows as well that people need to remember. To your point earlier about the Canadian tax treaty, there's a very small time period within which that election needs to be
Mhm.
made, I understand. So, yes. Oh, so do you have anything else to add, Jane? I thought this was a great episode. We had some technical glitches in the middle, which you wouldn't uh, know about, dear listener, but we made it. And yeah, did you have anything else that you wanted to add,
I
Jane?
think I've answered a lot of questions on this. So,
Yes.
what I'm going to say is if people have other questions, send them to us, and we're happy to do a part two of this if there are more questions on the backdoor Roth or Roth's
Yeah.
accounts or any retirement accounts. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's it. And thank you for asking some of those deep, deep questions, Manasa.
Yes, I enjoyed being the questioner this time. So, yes. And just like Jane said, if you have more questions, definitely please reach out to us. You can go to the website and sign up for a newsletter. We will have your email, or just drop us a note and we will try and answer all those questions we get on a future episode. So thanks for listening. Take care. Bye.